Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Jesse. I'm the director of BioCAT, and what I'm going to talk to you about now is just kind of an overview of APS-U and also how it's in particular affected our beamline. So the APS upgrade was a, let's say, roughly 18-month-long upgrade project for the advanced photon source, the synchrotron at which we're based. And the kind of driving force for this upgrade was to completely replace the electron storage. In doing so, they wanted to improve the X-ray brightness by up to 500-fold. So brightness is kind of an interesting metric. It includes both flux and beam size, and most of this gain in brightness is coming out of the change in the beam size to be much smaller rather than an increase in flux. So the old machine turned off in April 2023, as many of you are probably familiar. And then the APS, they were able to achieve first light at an experimental station on June 17th, 2024. Now, that's great, but for better or for worse, the APS has a large number of beamlines. I think we're up over 70 at this point. And so it's taking a while, and we're still in the process of bringing everybody back online. So our particular commissioning schedule, so last fall, September, October, we did kind of safety validation for the beamline. Then October, November, we did technical commissioning. This was getting the beam into all the hutches, lining up all the optics, characterizing everything to make sure it was working the way we expected. And then kind of in December, we had a couple of weeks of scientific commissioning. And we're continuing that for 2 more weeks in February. And then we're going to be done with commissioning. And so we're starting normal user operations in mid-February. I think right now, having looked at the schedule, we're anticipating the first user experiments on February 13th. So we're really excited to be back, and hopefully you'll get really excited to come back to BioCAT as we tell you about all the awesome new things that we can do. So this is just a nice photo. This was them opening a shutter at an experimental station for the first time, so I like to include that as well. So in terms of the upgrade itself and what it means for BioCAT, what are the effects we're thinking that we'll see? Well, we should get a significantly smaller horizontal beam size. We should get significantly smaller microfocus beams. We should get a bit more flux. We should have, in the long run, improved beam stability and uptime because it's an entirely new machine, and they won't have all the equipment failures from the 30-year-old equipment that was in the last room. And then kind of, important but long-term, is this upgrade makes the APS, one of, if not the best source in the world. And so this positions us to keep our facility and the APS as a whole kind of state-of-the-art and world-class for the next 25 plus years until they have to do another upgrade. So we have 2 talks after mine that are going to dig into kind of the details of the scientific programs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into the details of the X-rays. So this is a little bit more of a technical talk, but hopefully people will appreciate it anyways. I want to tell you the kinds of results that we're getting in terms of X-ray beams from this upgrade. So our beamline in general, just to orient you, we're an undulator-fed beamline. Beam goes through a monochromator, and we horizontally focus by sagittally bending the second crystal on the monochromator. We're vertically focused with a mirror, and we usually focus at the detector. In addition to this kind of standard layout, we also have 2 microfocus optics that are beryllium CRIs. So, when we got the specs for the upgrade and as we were going into this, we sat down and we simulated what we could expect in terms of the beam size and shape coming out of the upgrade. And I do want to point out all these simulations are done by Yujia Ding, who's a colleague of ours at the MRCAT beamline, which is our sister beamline at Sector 10. So thanks to her for that. So if we sat down and we put in perfect optics and we put in the APS source conditions, we expect a very clean, maybe 6x3 micron beam, perfectly focused, and it looks great, very exciting. And then you put in kind of the real known imperfections of our kind of current optics, and it gets a little bit worse. Right, so this thing fuzzes out, particularly in the vertical. That's partly because we don't have a good way to characterize the error in our horizontal focus very well, so we can't simulate it. But we expect a beam that's still very small, this is 6x14, for example, here, but that is larger than it could be and where the shape is not as good as it could be. So we can do the same simulation with our microfocus optics. With that, you're expecting a beam that's maybe submicron in each dimension, less than 1 by 1. This is with our longer focus optic. But again, you put in the current optics and it kind of smears everything out. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but before that, I want to stop and I want to compare kind of these simulations and the current results that we're able to measure with what we got in the APS and kind of how we're doing. So this is a table, there's a bunch of numbers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight a couple important improvements for you. So the first thing I want to highlight, we said the first bullet point I had a couple slides back was we expected a much smaller horizontal beam. And that is the case. So, previously we measured maybe 120 microns focused at the detector, and we're getting 16 microns. So it's not quite as good as it could be, and this is no doubt error in the optic we're not able to characterize, but it's still about 8 times better than it was. And this ends up actually being very significant for the muscle diffraction experiments, and Kong will tell you about that in the next talk. No, 2 talks. So this is one. So we are getting that much smaller horizontal beam we expected. And then I want to highlight, I also said we expect much smaller microfocus beams. So with our kind of long focus CRL, we previously got 4 by 20-ish micron beam. And now we're getting something that's kind of 3 by 1. So it is, again, much smaller than it was. It's still not quite as good as it could be, but this is a very significant improvement. It's 16 times better in the horizontal than it used to be. So, more than an order of magnitude, smaller. And we do get maybe a factor of 2-ish in flux as well. I'm not going to harp on that, but there is a little bit of flux gain. But mostly it's these much smaller beam sizes that are seen. So this is really exciting. We're already doing really well with the APS-U. But I think that table and then the images I showed you a couple slides back, it may have made it clear that our optics are now the limiting factor in the beam quality. This wasn't the case before the upgrade. Before the upgrade, the APS source was really the limiting factor. But our optics are kind of mostly original to the beamline. They're nearly 30 years old. They've served us really well, but they're certainly not up to modern spec. And so I'm very pleased to be able to tell you that this past August, the NIH approved a $2 million supplement to fund an upgrade to our current optics so we can take full advantage of the APS-U. So we're going to replace everything, the monochrometers and the mirror. We're going to get new KB-style horizontal and vertical focusing mirrors. Going to get a new monochrometer with both silicon and multi-layer optics, so we have the option of high energy resolution and high flux, depending on the experiment we want. And this project is underway, and we're expecting installation of these in about a year, maybe 14 months. And before you get really concerned, I want to say that we're going to do our absolute best to minimize the impact on user operations. We're anticipating somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks of lost user beam time for this. It's not going to be a year-long thing. It's going to be relatively short, maybe a couple weeks. And so it really should have minimal impact on the user program from a downtime point of view, but significant from a beam quality point of view. So if you take these new optics and you throw them into the simulation again, we have the perfect current, and you can see with the upgraded optics, it looks pretty darn close to the perfect. It's a nice symmetric beam. It's just maybe a little bit larger than you'd get if everything were exactly perfect. And so just, to put these all on a table again, and to highlight a few of the improvements. So, with adding in this multi-layer for more flux, we're expecting maybe 80 times increase in the flux available to beamline, which for many experiments will be unusable because of radiation damage, but there are a number of experiments that we're excited about where this could be very handy to have more flux for what we want to do. So that's one, is this 80-fold increase. In terms of the focus size, the vertical focus should get about 10 times better than the APS-U number, not than the old APS number, but then the APS-U number. And the horizontal focus should get about 3 times better than the APS-U number. So this is really going to push us all the way to take full advantage of these upgrades. And we're going to get a better beam shape, which is really important for some of the experiments that we do. So just to kind of summarize all of that then, right, so the APS-U is providing us with smaller, brighter beams and a state-of-the-art facility for BioCAT going forward. Even with the current optics, our measured beam size and flux, it's in line with what we expect for the APS-U. Seeing this almost 8-fold decrease in the horizontal beam size with the main optics. Somewhere depending on which dimension you're looking at and which optic, a 4 to 20-fold decrease in the microfocus beam size, so all the beams are much smaller. Once we hit full current in the ring, which should be this run, we expect to be about 2 times up in flux from where we were. And then we have this new ongoing optics upgrade that will let us take full advantage of the APS-U and provide kind of the best possible beams in the world, really, because the APS is essentially the best possible source in the world right now. And so we'll be able to get, another kind of 3 to 10-fold decrease in the main beam size, depending on which dimension you're looking at, 4-fold decrease in the microfocus beam size, an improved beam shape, and a ton more flux from the multilayer. And so these are kind of the X-ray characteristics. And then in the next 2 talks, what we're going to see is we're going to hear from the beamline scientists in charge of the SACS and the fiber programs about how these are really impacting your work at the beamline.